never thought a Monday morning could feel like a punch to the gut. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee steaming beside my laptop, trying to wake up before the first meeting of the day. When the Zoom screen loaded, my CEO's face filled the frame. He didn't smile, he didn't greet me. He leaned back in his chair like he owned the world. "You're fired," he said. That was it. No warning, no explanation. 5 years of late nights, missed holidays, and record-breaking numbers erased in 2 words. My chest tightened. I waited for more, some reason, some human decency. Instead, the call ended. The screen went black. I stared at my reflection in the dark monitor. My hands shook so badly I spilled coffee across the table. I felt embarrassed, even though no one was there to see it. Fired, over Zoom, like I was nothing. At first, anger hit me hard. I wanted to shout. I wanted to call him back and demand answers. But as the silence stretched, another thought crept in. He had rushed it. He had wanted control, not fairness. I wiped the table clean and closed my laptop slowly. I didn't know how yet, but I felt it deep in my bones. He had just made a huge mistake. I sat there for a long time, listening to my heart pound. Every bill, every plan, every future goal flashed through my mind at once. Panic tried to take over, but I forced myself to breathe. I needed to understand what had just happened. I opened my work email, thinking I would download my performance reviews before access disappeared. That was when I noticed something strange. Threads I didn't remember opening. Messages marked urgent but never sent to me directly. Curiosity beat fear. I clicked. What I saw made my stomach drop. Emails about shifting numbers between accounts. Messages telling staff to clean up reports before audits. Client conversations that didn't match official invoices. This wasn't messy management. This was fraud. The deeper I went, the worse it got. Fake vendors, split payments, instructions written casually like no one would ever question them. My CEO's name sat at the center of it all. I leaned back in my chair, cold spreading through my body. That smug face on Zoom suddenly made sense. He wasn't firing me to save money. He was cutting risk. I realized something important in that moment. I hadn't been fired because I failed. I had been fired because I knew too much. And now, so did I. I didn't rush. That part mattered most. Every angry instinct told me to expose everything right away, but I stopped myself. Mistakes happen when emotions lead. I needed this to be clean. I created folders. I saved emails with dates, times, and full threads. I took screenshots and backed them up twice. I wrote notes explaining what each message showed and why it mattered. I treated it like evidence, not revenge. While I worked, my access stayed active. That surprised me. He had been so quick to fire me, yet careless enough to leave the door open. Each minute felt borrowed. When I was done, I sat back and looked at what I had collected. It wasn't a few bad decisions. It was a pattern, a system built on lies. That night, I didn't sleep much. By morning, I knew exactly what I had to do. I found the right place, filled out the report, and attached everything. Every file, every note. I checked it twice before hitting send. When I finally forwarded the emails to the FBI, my finger hovered for a second. Then I clicked. The room went quiet. No fireworks, no instant relief, just a calm certainty. There was no going back now. With the report sent, reality set in. Justice takes time, but rent does not. I updated my resume, careful and honest, focusing on results I could prove. I applied everywhere. Competitors, smaller firms, places I once thought were out of reach. Interviews came slowly at first. I smiled through them, never mentioning the firing. I spoke about growth, experience, and values. Inside, tension coiled tighter every day. Weeks passed, 4 of them. Each morning I checked the news. Nothing. Each night I wondered if I had done the right thing. Doubt can be loud when you're alone. Then I got an offer. A strong one. A competing firm that respected my work and didn't talk down to me. I accepted without hesitation. On my first day, I walked in lighter than I had felt in years. Still, I waited. I knew what was coming, even if no one else did. Somewhere, questions were being asked, doors were being knocked on. One afternoon, my phone buzzed nonstop. Messages, missed calls, alerts. I opened a news site, and there it was. My former CEO's name, bold and unavoidable. The investigation was public. Everything moved fast after that. Clients pulled out, employees panicked, articles multiplied by the hour. The company tried to deny it, but the email spoke louder than any statement. That evening, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. His voice cracked through the line, nothing like the one I heard on Zoom. He begged. He asked what I wanted. He said it was a misunderstanding. He promised fixes, money, apologies. I listened quietly, feeling something strange settle in my chest. Power. I told him nothing. I didn't need to. The truth was already moving without me. When the call ended, I set my phone down and stared out the window, watching the city lights come on. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't angry anymore either. I felt steady, clean. I had survived the worst moment of my career and walked out stronger. I hadn't shouted, I hadn't begged, I had simply acted when it mattered. That night, I realized something that changed everything. Being fired had freed me. Silence had protected me. Patience had won. And this story was far from over. The next morning, I walked into my new office with a strange mix of relief and anticipation. My desk was spotless, a blank canvas, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The team welcomed me warmly, but I kept one eye on the news. Every headline about my old company reminded me why I'd acted with patience. I logged into my work email, mostly to forward personal messages, but paused when a familiar address popped up. It was him, my former CEO. No subject, just a single line. Call me, now. I smiled faintly and deleted it. I wasn't interested in speaking to him. Not yet. Not ever if I could avoid it. He had underestimated me, and I wasn't about to give him another chance to manipulate the situation. Instead, I focused on my new role. My team needed guidance, mentorship, and clear strategies. I organized files, scheduled meetings, and set benchmarks. I wanted to build something meaningful here, something ethical, transparent, and above board. But the tension lingered. I couldn't stop checking updates. I knew that the FBI's involvement would be slow, meticulous. The threads of my actions were quietly unraveling his empire, and I had a front row seat to watch it all. And secretly, that gave me a strange, exhilarating sense of control. A week passed, and the first wave of news hit the public. Headlines screamed about missing funds, manipulated client accounts, and ongoing federal investigations. My former CEO's name was everywhere, the arrogance he once carried now reduced to panic in every photo. Colleagues who had once laughed at my diligence called me, nervously asking for advice. It was surreal. For years, they had ignored details I flagged, dismissed emails I forwarded, and overlooked inconsistencies. Now they sought my guidance. I stayed silent. Silence was my ally. Speaking too soon could ruin everything. At home, I reviewed the emails I had forwarded, checking every attachment, every thread. They were airtight. I had documented every manipulation, every step of his fraud. No one could claim ignorance. At night, I dreamed of confrontation. My old CEO, smug and untouchable, cornered at last. But in the morning, logic prevailed. This wasn't about drama, it was about justice. And patience was the weapon I wielded. 2 weeks into my new job, I received a call from a reporter. They had somehow learned about my role in uncovering the fraud, but didn't know I had forwarded the emails. I deflected, careful with my words. I wanted recognition on my terms, not sensationalism that could jeopardize the investigation. Meanwhile, internal chaos at my old company intensified. Emails leaked, employees were interrogated, and board meetings dissolved into shouting matches. I watched quietly from a distance, noting the irony. The very people who had ignored warnings were now scrambling, realizing too late that they had been complicit in silence. At night, I checked my phone obsessively. Nothing. Then one afternoon, it rang, a number I recognized instantly. "Listen," my former CEO said, voice trembling. "You have no idea how bad it's going to get. Help me, please." I leaned back, calm. "I'm not your employee anymore, and I don't owe you anything." He begged, promised money, promised loyalty, promised anything. But I stayed quiet. Let the law work. Let karma unfold. For the first time, I felt untouchable. Not arrogant, not vengeful. Simply untouchable. The FBI investigation moved into overdrive. Subpoenas went out. Clients were questioned. Internal emails I had forwarded became exhibits. Every fraudulent transaction, every manipulated report, every attempt to cover tracks was exposed systematically. Meanwhile, my new company flourished. I implemented ethical protocols that I had always dreamed of applying, creating workflows that protected employees, clients, and finances. Productivity soared, respect grew, and through it all, I remained focused, careful, and deliberate. Then came the news that sealed the irony. My old company had lost multiple clients to competitors, and investors demanded full audits. Panic swept the firm like wildfire. Emails to me continued, desperate, pleading. I smiled, not cruelly, but with a sense of justice long overdue.
He had underestimated me, and now he was paying the price for his arrogance. For the first time in months, I slept peacefully, knowing that my quiet, calculated actions had set an unstoppable chain of events in motion. By the end of the month, the story went public. Media outlets reported the fraud in detail, citing missing funds, client deception, and blatant manipulation. The company's reputation collapsed overnight. My former CEO was suspended pending legal review, facing potential charges that could ruin him entirely. Emails flooded my inbox. Clients, colleagues, even former friends, some congratulatory, some curious. Yet I stayed measured, responding politely, never bragging, never gloating. Patience had been my ally. Arrogance would have undone everything.
At home, I reflected on the journey. Fired on Zoom, betrayed, humiliated. Yet those experiences had made me sharper, more careful, more resilient. I had turned the ultimate injustice into opportunity, quietly, methodically, and with precision. And as the sun set, casting a warm glow over the city skyline, I realized something profound. True power doesn't come from rage. It doesn't come from chaos. True power comes from calm calculation, patience, and the knowledge that justice, when handled correctly, cannot be stopped. I wasn't just the employee who got fired. I was the one who held the ultimate leverage all along. The following morning, my phone buzzed with another unexpected message. This time, it was from an anonymous source within my old company. They're scrambling, internal chaos. You were right all along. I smiled faintly, appreciating the poetic justice, but keeping my distance. I didn't need confirmation. I already knew. The threads I had pulled were unraveling the company, and there was nothing left for me to do except watch the dominoes fall. At my new office, I reviewed the latest project updates. My team was thriving, energized by clear communication and transparency. It was strange how much satisfaction I got from watching people work efficiently, ethically, and respectfully, things I had always taken for granted in my old role. I paused to glance at the news. Headlines screamed about internal audits, investor outrage, and executives scrambling to cover tracks. It was surreal. 1 year of planning, patience, and careful documentation, and now the consequences hit like a tidal wave. Yet amidst all this chaos, I remained calm. My career was intact, my reputation was unscathed, and the best part? I had acted without vengeance. I hadn't sought to destroy. I had sought to protect myself and others from harm. Justice, it seemed, had a way of arriving quietly, without fanfare, yet with devastating precision. By midweek, the pressure on my former CEO intensified. Board meetings were chaotic, and employees who once feared him now whispered rumors behind closed doors. I had anticipated this fallout, but watching it unfold in real time was almost cinematic. I received a call from a journalist. They had discovered fragments of my role in the investigation and wanted an interview. I declined politely. Publicity could jeopardize the FBI's timeline. I had learned the value of patience, every move calculated, every action deliberate. Meanwhile, my own projects flourished. Ethical protocols, clear documentation, and accountability became the hallmarks of my leadership. My team respected the structure, and clients were thrilled with transparency and integrity. The contrast with my old company couldn't have been starker. That evening, I reviewed the emails I had forwarded once more. Each one was a precise record of manipulation, fraud, and unethical behavior. Every line documented the CEO's arrogance and disregard for rules. I realized then that my calm, methodical approach had become more powerful than any outburst or confrontation ever could. In moments of quiet reflection, I understood a fundamental truth. Power isn't about authority, it's about knowledge, preparation, and timing. The FBI's involvement escalated rapidly. Subpoenas were served, and company servers were seized for evidence. My former CEO was under immense pressure, facing questions he had no answers for. It was a tense dance, watched closely from afar. I continued at my new firm, implementing stricter protocols and mentoring my team on ethical practices. I made a point of emphasizing accountability. Lessons I had learned through betrayal were now teaching others the importance of integrity. One afternoon, my phone rang again.
This time, it was my former CEO's assistant nervously asking for guidance on what to do next. I kept my tone neutral. I wasn't here to help. I wasn't here to watch him wriggle free. I was here to maintain my own path, untouched by his chaos. Later that evening, I reviewed internal memos leaked online. Patterns I had noticed months before were now public knowledge. Falsified invoices, altered contracts, and manipulated client reports. I had seen it coming, documented it, and let the system catch up. For the first time, I realized the magnitude of what I had accomplished. Being fired wasn't the end. It had been a calculated pivot toward ultimate control. By the end of the month, my former CEO was facing formal charges. News outlets detailed every misstep, every act of fraud, and every failed cover-up. His arrogance had been laid bare for the world to see. I avoided gloating. Instead, I focused on what truly mattered, building a sustainable, ethical career. My team at the new firm thrived, morale was high, and productivity soared. Clients praised our transparency and accountability. I had transformed my own setback into a stepping stone for something far greater. Late one night, I received another call. This time, it was my former client of my old company, panicked and seeking clarification on contracts. I kept my tone neutral. I wasn't here to help. I wasn't here to watch him wriggle free. I was here to maintain my own path, untouched by his chaos. Through this, I realized something profound, the power of patience and preparation. My former CEO's downfall had nothing to do with drama or revenge. It was the inevitability of consequences, carefully documented and delivered by someone who refused to be overlooked. In silence, I allowed the chaos of my old workplace to collapse, knowing that my calculated response had secured my future.
One morning, the FBI sent a brief update confirming that the investigation had resulted in formal charges and a temporary freeze on the CEO's assets. The news broke on every channel. His arrogance and incompetence had finally collided with reality. I stayed focused on my own projects, yet allowed myself a moment to reflect. The power of patience and preparation had never been clearer. While my former CEO scrambled, I had established credibility, influence, and financial security. I reviewed the emails one last time, noting how meticulous my documentation had been. Without emotion, I appreciated the skill and foresight I had applied. It was proof that controlled action could dismantle even the most seemingly untouchable arrogance. That evening, my team gathered for a celebration. Success wasn't just measured in profits or new contracts, it was measured in ethics, transparency, and trust. I realized that these principles were more enduring than titles or temporary power. By the time the sun set, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Being fired on Zoom had led to something far greater: empowerment, influence, and the ultimate vindication that came not from anger, but from intelligence, patience, and ethical action. The trial began quietly, but the media frenzy quickly escalated. Courtrooms overflowed, cameras lined the streets, and every headline reminded the public of my former CEO's fraud. Investors panicked further, and employees whispered in hallways about what might happen next. I wasn't there in person. My role had been completed when I forwarded the emails and logged the evidence, but I followed every proceeding, every deposition, every revelation. Witnesses testified, documents were examined, and slowly the scope of the corruption became undeniable. Meanwhile, my consulting firm grew steadily. Word of my expertise spread across industries. Corporate leaders sought me out, hoping to prevent the disasters that had toppled my former CEO. My team expanded, bringing in talented individuals who valued integrity over shortcuts, accountability over arrogance. One evening, as I sat reviewing a compliance report for a municipal client, a news alert popped up. The CEO had been formally indicted. The headline made me pause. No gloating, no triumph, just the realization that the world finally matched the truth I had uncovered months ago. I leaned back in my chair, reflecting on how far I had come since that Zoom call.
Fired, humiliated, underestimated, I had transformed every setback into leverage. Every cautious step, every careful decision had built a foundation far stronger than any single corporate title could provide. Despite the whirlwind, life continued. I maintained routines, early mornings, focused work, client meetings, and late nights refining new compliance protocols. My past haunted me only in brief flashes, memories of the CEO's smug grin, the abrupt "you're fired," the Zoom freeze. One day, an unexpected email arrived. It was from the former CEO's legal team, requesting a meeting. Their tone was formal, almost desperate. They sought clarification on the documents I had forwarded, hoping to salvage their defense. I replied politely through my attorney, establishing strict boundaries. My decision was firm. I wouldn't interfere beyond legal obligations. This wasn't about revenge. It was about ensuring justice and protecting my professional integrity. Later that week, I attended a seminar on corporate ethics. Speaking to an audience of aspiring professionals, I shared insights from my experience. I emphasized patience, documentation, and ethical vigilance. My story resonated. Every head nodded. Every phone recorded notes. I realized then that influence didn't require titles. It came from action, preparation, and the courage to do what others avoided. That night, I returned home to Karen. We sat quietly, reflecting on how a firing that had seemed catastrophic had instead propelled my career, expanded my opportunities, and reinforced my sense of justice. My perspective had shifted. Power isn't earned through authority. It's cultivated through action and foresight. Weeks passed, and the CEO's trial drew toward a verdict. The tension in the public sphere mirrored the months I had spent preparing for every possible outcome. The company's board, previously loyal to him, had reorganized under court supervision, trying to mitigate further losses. I remained detached. My involvement had been surgical, forwarding emails, documenting evidence, and ensuring the chain of proof was unbroken. I watched the chaos with measured satisfaction. This was the fruit of meticulous planning and patience. Unexpectedly, I received a private call from one of my former colleagues at the company. They confessed their gratitude, saying they had finally felt safe speaking the truth. I reminded them, courage is most valuable when paired with preparation. That evening, as Karen and I reviewed strategic growth plans for my consulting firm, a notification flashed on my laptop. The CEO had been sentenced, with asset freezes and restitution orders. My heart didn't leap with joy, but I felt an undeniable relief. Justice had been served, not through personal vendetta, but by methodical, ethical action. I looked at Karen and said softly, "It's over." She squeezed my hand. I smiled, understanding that the ultimate victory wasn't in punishment, but in securing my own future while exposing wrongdoing. The aftermath brought unexpected opportunities. Municipalities, corporations, and educational institutions reached out, seeking guidance on ethical compliance, corporate oversight, and fraud prevention. I expanded my team, recruiting talent who shared the vision of integrity-first management. Clients were impressed not only by our expertise, but by our history. My story became a case study in boardrooms and classrooms, illustrating the power of calculated action over impulsive reaction. I remained humble, sharing lessons without exaggeration, letting results speak for themselves. One evening, as we celebrated a milestone, our 10th successful consulting contract, an email arrived from a client who had been directly impacted by my former CEO's fraud. They thanked me personally, emphasizing how our intervention had prevented further losses and protected employees. I realized then that the true impact extended far beyond corporate scandals. It safeguarded livelihoods. Karen and I reflected on the journey, recognizing that what had begun as humiliation had become empowerment. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, creating systems and structures that would endure long after the headlines faded. The lesson crystallized. When betrayal strikes, preparation, patience, and integrity convert setbacks into lasting influence. Years later, I looked back on that Zoom call that had changed everything. "You're fired" seemed like the end, but it was the catalyst. I had exposed fraud, preserved my career, built a thriving firm, and reshaped corporate oversight practices. I walked through my office, filled with employees working diligently, clients visiting confidently, and a culture of trust and accountability. Each face reminded me of the power of strategic action, of turning adversity into opportunity without succumbing to anger or impulsivity. I checked the news one last time. My former CEO remained a cautionary tale, his arrogance a lesson to all in the corporate world. Meanwhile, my consulting firm was recognized nationally for ethical leadership and effective compliance strategies. Karen stood beside me, smiling. "Not bad for someone fired on Zoom," he said. I laughed, remembering the shock, the betrayal, and the countless hours of preparation. I realized the truth. Revenge isn't about destruction. It's about creating, safeguarding, and thriving. It's about holding the ultimate power, not in anger, but in measured, intelligent action. And so, what began as humiliation ended in empowerment. I wasn't just a former employee. I was a force of accountability, influence, and integrity. And that, more than anything, was the sweetest victory of all. If you've ever faced betrayal, injustice, or being underestimated, don't just react. Take control, plan your moves, and turn setbacks into unstoppable power. Subscribe now, hit the notification bell, and join me as we uncover more real-life stories of resilience, strategy, and ultimate triumph. See you in the next one.